shows, we're talking to people who have been in the industry and been pioneers for a number of years in order to give perspective on how we arrived at where we are today. And I'm honored to be joined by Adam Chire. Adam is the co-founder of Viv Labs and a current VP at Samsung, and has a 25 to 30 year history in the industry. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say, yes.
Okay, all right, so let's go back so we can give the perspective, because one of the things I did point out yesterday on the main stage was that most of the people at this conference who are working on the assistant side of voice recognition, not the IVR world,
right.
Most of them have been in the industry fewer than 5 years, in fact, about 40%, just a couple of years. And so they don't really know how we got to where we are. You do. So I thought it would be really illuminating for you to do that. So why don't you tell the audience how you got started in the voice assistant world?
So my first voice assistant, was in 1993, before I ever saw a web browser. So literally my first web browser experience was in 94 with Mosaic.
Yep.
So I was imagining that, I go, someday there will be computers around the world with content and services we want to access, and I kind of imagined that we would have an assistant that you could say, I want to know this, I want to do this, and it would help you get things done by delegating to all those services. So I was working at SRI International. They were one of the top speech recognition efforts, but research quality, funded mostly out of the government.
Right.
So DARPA did a lot of work to really get speech in the early days up to where it is now.
Had you ever seen the Knowledge Navigator video that Apple put out?
Absolutely, it was very inspirational. I actually have a talk I've done on the web called Siri, Back to the Future.
Okay.
And what it does is it says, okay, here in 2011, Siri comes out. Well, it's amazing, but let me tell you about the version that came out in 2010 that was so cool. Steve Jobs called unannounced our company, said, I want to buy this entire company.
Right.
And that was cool, but let me tell you about the version that's 2007 that we went to investors with. It did all these things that never made it to subsequent versions. I go all the way back, and it gets more and more advanced the further you go back in time, so Back to the Future.
So you kept stripping features out?
In a way. I mean, I could have told the story the other way too, I don't want to, but there were many things that were tried that really are ripe for the assistant community to kind of look at. So there's a rich history of ideas and techniques that just never quite made it into commercialization because you're always on deadline and
I've seen
you have
a video,
to prioritize.
I think there's like a YouTube video from the 90s of you demoing one of your first assistants,
So that I went literally in this Back to the Future. I could do 2011, 2010, 2007, 2003, 1999, and then the 1993 system that I built to get started. And I show videos of what these systems were and what cool things never made it into subsequent assistants. And then I say, and in 1987, Apple came out with the Knowledge Navigator.
Right.
And that is the most advanced at all. But it was just a concept prototype.
Yeah, it was a video.
But it did all of these things, some of them that made it into assistants, but some that didn't, right? So looking at that history, so for all those people who are kind of new to the space and think all we can do and all there is to do is this very limited, very rigid back and forth dialogue, you should explore some of these because there's a wealth of ideas and opportunities to really pick things that weren't quite ready for prime time, 20 years ago, but now could be commercializable, and I think that's a huge opportunity.
Okay.
And the punchline, one last piece, the punchline is, in that 1987 video, it was set in the future. It was a concept video of this cool thing, but you can actually figure out the day and the year and the month of the day they chose in the future. And because the calendar is left on a desk, and there's references to years.
2011?
And it turns out you go all the way back to where you started within 2 weeks of the Siri launch.
Yeah.
So Apple started it, Apple then started it again with the Siri launch. And so that was sort of the punchline of this dialogue.
In 1993,
yes,
what could your demo do?
So it had a lot of the things that came out in Siri. There were calendars, there was email, there were speech recognition. It was multimodal. Had a pen-based interface and a GUI, so you could handwrite and then correct the writing with speech. You could speak and then just cross out if it got something wrong and handwrite the new word. So it was a very multimodal interface. There were maps, so you could search for restaurants. And the coolest part, which I think is still not available on any assistant today, it was completely dynamic, which means you would literally plug in a new assistant, think of like a website or a web service on the fly. It would bring new capabilities and APIs and language that map to those. So imagine an email program. You could say, oh, email's a noun, email's a verb. You can say, email Adam this message. But then you could...
So it was web services before we used that term.
It was web services before we used that term. But the cool part is you could use language to dynamically compose requests that went across different assistants, different services that didn't know about each other. So if you plugged in an email and a fax, you could say fax this to Bob or email this to Jane. But you could now say if email arrives from Bob, fax it to Jane. And nobody, the system didn't know about email or fax didn't know about email didn't know about fax. You plug them all in, you can now do these composed queries. So one of the canonical use cases is when mail arrives for me about some subject or from a person, notify me immediately. There was something like 12 different separately developed services that work together to find out where I am, to translate the message in a form. The phone would ring and it would play me the email message because it was urgent. And so a very dynamic, extensible system at a level that I don't think we still have today.
That's right. Although we did see a version of that in The Office. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So people who are Office fans, there was this thing called Woof, which was funny. So you had that capability back then, and I know you worked in the web days and did a number of different things, but at some point you returned to the assistant, and that was the genesis of Siri. And I think we didn't say it in the introduction, but Adam's also the co-founder of Siri, which eventually sold to Apple as an independent company. Why don't you talk a little bit about how that came about, and let's take it up to the app, not to the assistant within the iPhone yet.
So I was at SRI through the 90s, built this first voice assistant, and then maybe 50 more for all sorts of applications. We had a smart home powered assistant where you could talk to your TV, and the phone would ring and the caller ID would show up on the TV, and you'd say, let it go to voicemail.
So did you assume a multi-assistant world at that time?
No. I've always had this vision. I don't want multiple assistants. I want one assistant.
But you built 50.
It was all on the same infrastructure.
Okay,
so
got it.
even you could think of it as 50 slices of use cases of the same assistant. So some were more military-based, smart-based. We had augmented reality. We had physical robots. We had all of these cool things, all through a multimodal assistant-based conversational interface. I left for a few years and went into the commercial world and did enterprise software and AI. We actually built, I'll call it a Siri for Salesforce in 2001, which Salesforce ended up licensing as the Salesforce.com mobile edition. And so at the time they had no mobile interface.
Right.
This was the age of Blackberries, right?
Exactly.
So we built a system where you could email, you'd say, find me opportunities with 80% probability to close greater than $1 million. And you'd send an email, it would respond, and then you'd reply, and it would refine, say, oh, what about the ones in Boston? So that actually shipped as part of, so I started that effort that got OEM'd. And then I went back to research. So I rejoined SRI. I led the largest AI project in US history called Kalo, about $250 million over 5 years. 27 subcontractors, all the best universities, and the goal was to build an intelligence system that would learn in the wild, so that as you interacted with it, and again it was for information workers, you go to meetings, you have files, data, there was an assistant that could help you organize your life, help you take actions and get things done, and automate things in your life. It had a meeting understanding component, so you'd walk into a meeting, plop down a device with a 360 camera and a speaker. It would watch you diagram on the whiteboard, and I would look at you. It would know I'm looking at you. So I said, why is this, is it on time? And you'd say, no, it's late.
To this great research?
650 publications. and some startup companies, getting a long answer to your question, including a spin out called Siri. So we spun out of SRI International. The company was founded by myself. I'm kind of the back-end AI. Doug Kitlaus was the CEO, marketeer. Tom Gruber was the VP of design.
Right.
We worked for 2 years. We grew to about 20 people, a little over 20 people. And we launched a free app in the App Store called Siri. And it was, of all the assistants I've done, perhaps I'm most proud of that one, because when you're a startup, you get to control everything, right? So it was exactly what we wanted it to be, and we put so much love and thought and disputes into that software, so I was very proud of that.
What could it do?
So it had about 25 different domains. It was the first mobile assistant, so it was out and about. You could book restaurants, you could buy tickets, you could buy movie tickets, et cetera, et cetera. What was a little different about this version of Siri than what I've seen was it had a very blended, aggregated approach. So when you said, find me a good restaurant, 7 different restaurant services will simultaneously compete and cooperate to provide you with a single list. So you would have the reservation times from OpenTable, the photos from CityGrid, the reviews from Yelp, the deals from restaurant.com, and a number of others. So it was all a blended result, and they would compete, cooperate in a very dynamic way. It also had transactions, so you could make that reservation. It had conversation, refinement, and yeah, it had some beautiful user interface concepts that I still think I have not seen anyone do, including my later attempts, around discovery, which is so important in the voice assistant space. Today, people don't know the limits, the boundaries of what's in scope and what's out of scope. And if they ask for something out of scope, it's not going to perform well. But how do they know what's in when you can say anything? And so I think the original Siri app had some very clever ideas about how to approach that that I've never seen replicated.
Okay, so let's, I want to go there, but let's say, so you have the Siri app, you get the call from Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
He says, come to the house.
Yeah, so it was out of the blue, literally the phone rings. It was, back then on the iPhone you had to swipe to answer.
Oh, and you sometimes
had an
you had an iPhone?
And we had an iPhone, of course we had an iPhone.
Well,
right?
I don't know,
no,
not everyone
did.
had one then.
We did. In fact, I have been working on assistants for ages, but I had this thesis that a revolution was going to come around on the user interface side. Okay. In 2004, you can go see my presentation on the web. For me, 2004 was the 10th anniversary of the web, from 1994. So I made 10 predictions for the next 10 years. Some of them, 3 of them, turned out really, really accurate. Okay. The others a little bit less. Yeah.
Time to tell on the others.
So, and the 3 best predictions translated to 3 companies I started. So I said, 1, data is going to move to the cloud, and once it's all aggregated, we didn't call that then, you'll have machine learning and kind of what we now call big data to be able to process that. So I started a company called Sentient. At the same time, I made in 2004, I said social networks will go mainstream. It's crazy.
Yes.
Facebook, I'd never heard of it.
We had MySpace.
MySpace, no, it came out, it became the largest, in 2006, it became the #1 website by traffic in the US. 2004 it wasn't even on my radar. We had LinkedIn, which was very niche, and Friendster with 13 million, but it was also kind of niche and big in Brazil, but So with that, I started a social network for social activism called change.org. I was founding member and today an advisor now. And today I think we're just at about 300 million registered members.
Oh, wow.
And then I said, with data and services moving to the cloud, there'll be a revolution on the interface side. And when the iPhone came out, I said, that's what I've been waiting for. And it's hard to remember, but at the time, everyone was like, oh no, only phone companies can make something as complicated as a phone. This is not going to be successful, it's a fad. Apple's a music player company. And I said, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. This is I said 2 years from now, the game is flipped. Every handset manufacturer, telco, will be scrambling to compete with Apple's iPhone, which is going to dominate.
Right.
So what could we build that could be competitive? Well, the screen is still small, it's hard to type on a keyboard, the bandwidth is slow, but if you could have a conversational assistant that you can ask exactly for you want in one step, and then refine it, that gets through all of that. So we, in effect, built Siri for Apple's competitors. And then the irony is, as you said, one day we launched the app and Steve Jobs calls the office. So we're swiping on the iPhone, it's not picking up, we're like, answer, it says Apple on the caller ID. And we hear Steve and he's like, hey, it's Steve, what you doing? Why not come over to my house?
Yeah.
We did, he made it clear he wanted to buy the company. We said, we're not interested, thank you, goodbye, we're flattered. But they came back a month later, convinced us they understood the big vision and that we could change the world more with Apple than without, and we eventually joined.
So then you launched Siri on the iPhone, and that really was the introduction of the modern era of voice assistants. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it was the first mass market conversational assistant, and it went viral. It was on late night TV, comedians are saying the top 10 things they found to do with Siri and funny things it would say.
I heard it was problematic that it was so popular.
You always forecast how much scale you think this is going to have, and this was like a couple orders of magnitude off. We did not think everyone in the entire country would, during a primetime TV thing, go, that's cool, pick up their iPhone and try queries at the same time. I mean, for speech systems, as you know, at the time it took one channel, one CPU per user for the length of the utterance. So you get, 40 million people going click and your servers are burning. We did have a little bit of behind the scenes, we were sleeping on cots, literally army cots in the hallways, trying to keep the servers up and happy. And to the most part, there was some little bit of outage, but for the most part, we managed to keep it together. It stabilized, and then people were loving it. So yeah, we really, this is the first time that I think it defined what an experience, conversational assistant experience, could be like.
Right.
And people responded and said, we want that and we want more.
Right. But it's fair to say that when you launched on the iPhone, it had fewer features than the app that you built for the iPhone.
Yeah, absolutely, very different. So, the app, we were all about web services in the cloud, accessing through APIs. Right. Steve Jobs said, hey, we care about apps too at Apple. We like that, but we have this app ecosystem. Siri should also be able to control apps. So the first version of Siri took the 15 or so apps that came with your iPhone, so email and messaging and maps and stocks and what have you, and said we're going to control literally the apps. And then we'll have an infrastructure for controlling apps and services, and this will be a beautiful multimodal complementary experience for accessing everything.
So I have a perspective on the narrowing of Siri's capabilities for that launch, and it makes sense because you had to do it at scale. And tell me if this is a fair statement. It seems like it's more voice navigation, voice control than voice assistant, because it said, we've got these apps, and I'll allow you to create a message, like a text message, with voice, and then strip some of those things out. I know that obviously you've moved beyond that, and then you wound up departing, but it seemed like it sort of got stuck there. Is that a fair statement or no?
So I would say it was not about voice control of apps.
Okay.
Because if that were the case, when you said send me a message, it would have popped up the app screen.
Okay.
Which it did not do. Siri is a layer above.
Right.
It is its own interface. It has a different paradigm than voice. So it is conversational. You can say, oh, change the message to this, or add Bill to my message, and it's conversational, it's contextual. There were use cases like reserving open table restaurant that is transactional of a sort. So I would say I've always imagined the assistant as something different than just voice control of apps.
Right.
For me, there's the web, there's mobile, an assistant is something a little more and different. It's a different layer.
Yeah.
Not everything is right for an assistant. You're not going to have a drawing app that's assistant powered. You're just going to draw,
that's
or
right.
whatever. So, it's good for certain things, and I think the original, the Siri out there did follow that.
Okay. And so you stayed at Apple for a little while, but then you left and you helped sort of manifest your original vision with Viv Labs.
Yeah, so my vision from the beginning was always about an open ecosystem. For various reasons, I didn't feel I could pursue that at Apple. So I took a little time off. I spent almost 3 years at Apple.
Right.
And then I left and said, well, I'm going to, I believe in this. I believe in voice assistants with my heart and my career.
Yeah.
I have this picture. I know what I want. Since '93, I've seen it so clearly. And so I said, I'm going to start again. And we started Viv Labs. And the whole focus of Viv Labs is how can you create a scalable ecosystem. So in end of 2012, early 2013, everyone was just rushing, in my view, to create clones of Siri, right? A year later, everyone was coming out with, Assistant A and Assistant B and Assistant C. That
you set expectations.
That pretty much feature by feature, you could say, will you marry me? Check. What's the weather? Check. Send a message? Check. It was like, I'm like, man, they should go back and look at the Back to the Future
the video.
Talk because
people exactly what you could do.
I go, here are 50 different things you can do with assistants, and everyone created the exact same one that we did the first time. There's so much more you could do. But for me, it was about ecosystem. So in early 2013, with again Doug Hitlaus, the original CEO of Siri, and Chris Brigham, who was really one of the chief architect, the main tech guy who did so much of the heavy lifting for Siri, we started Viv Labs. And it's about how do you empower the world's developers to create all the functionality in an assistant. I mean, if the web were only a few hard-coded things by one company, it wouldn't be the web. Or if mobile ecosystem just were Apple apps or Google apps, it wouldn't be mobile.
It's easier to do though when it's totally controlled. It just might not be as much value.
There are specific, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we proved that if you control everything, you can build it. That's what Siri was about.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now the question, and it's still the question today, how can we have a truly scalable ecosystem? And what I mean scalable is not only on the developer side, we've solved that. Google and Amazon have 80, 90,000, I don't even know how many skills or actions. Yeah, so that means it's scalable on the developer side, but it's not scalable on the end user side yet, because no one's really using those third-party skills much. Right. Most people use the built-in. And we have to flip that equation. So it has to be that 5% of the functionality people use comes built into the assistant. 95%, just like in mobile, you've got a phone, you use some of the apps that came with it, but your surface area is defined by the apps you've downloaded.
That's right.
Well, I need to be able to discover the brands I trust for the activities that I care about. A 12-year-old, a CEO, a teacher, a lawyer, a construction worker, they're not all the same. They don't need the same assistant. They have different interests, different desires,
so personalized.
Different goals. But when people say personalized, often they just mean, it's going to learn that I like Italian food.
That would be helpful because most assistants actually don't learn that today.
Which is good. Try Bixby. That is built into the platform, so every capability can use that. But I mean radically personalized, to the point that in the long term, I think the brands of Alexa and Siri and Cortana and Bixby go away, because I want to shape and form and construct the assistant I want. And it should have the personality I want, the name I want, and the functionality I want. I mean, remember ringtones was a $3 billion industry, just so I could say, hey, I'm cool because I listen to this song.
Exactly.
And imagine you pick up your voice assistant, you ask a query that's unusual, it answers in a really cool, different way, and it does something that no one is expecting.
Yeah.
How cool is that, right, to the people around you? And they're going to say, how did you, what service are you using? Can I share? There's going to be a social sharing of personalities, and so you're going to really customize, your assistant in a way that I think
so
is
it's
much
really
more
an
than can be
assistant of
done
one.
today.
It's like a one-to-one type of thing, very unique.
Yes.
And so,
But constructed out of the services and brands that each user knows and trusts.
So, and that's consistent. I mean, I think of Dog's presentation at TechCrunch Disrupt that, I don't know, 5 years ago now? It was a while ago, I don't remember.
Maybe not that long, but getting close
3 or 4,
probably.
yeah. And that was shortly before, just a few months before you wound up getting acquired by Samsung. And so, tell me the Viv Labs into transformation into the Bixby story and how that leads you to what your original vision was.
Yeah, perfect. So as I mentioned, Viv Labs was all about creating the tools and a platform that could enable a scalable ecosystem. So we started talking about, we were a small startup, again, mid-20s. We wanted to get distribution. So we would go to different companies that could distribute a voice assistant on global scale. And in this case, Samsung, the talks with Samsung actually turned in, hey, maybe we want to acquire you. So Samsung, I thought, was pretty unique in a number of ways. Number one, they have more devices than anyone on the market, close to 1 billion device footprint and 500 million new devices shipped. And they're everywhere we want an assistant to be.
Right.
So not just phones, they acquired Harman Kardon, which is speakers, but also car components.
Right.
They're number one in TVs and refrigerators and all sorts of electronics. So we're like, wow, that's one company who can seed the Viv technology on many different places. And additionally, as part of joining, they committed that they would open up Bixby beyond Samsung devices, which was super compelling. Because if you want to be the next paradigm, as important as the web or mobile, it can't just be a Samsung device feature. So if any developers are out there, I want them to know, yes, it's on Samsung devices today, but Samsung has committed publicly they're going to open it up to every device
so an
in the
IoT
future.
Device could
but everything. I mean, it could be other brands of phones and things like that should have Bixby on them. The robot we'll be dealing with in home personal robot in 5 years or whatever. I should have a Bixby interface or a connection to this assistant-powered service ecosystem. So just like the web, everything now, every car needs a web browser. Well, soon every device and facing device will need a connection to this assistant ecosystem.
Right. Okay, so one of the things, and we're going to bring this to a close in just a moment, but I love this talk about sort of where you started. One of the things I think that is missing predominantly in the voice assistants we've seen is this idea of context maintenance, and there's multiple layers of that. One is the session you're in, right? So do you have to repeat yourself? If you go to different apps, do they remember that you just said this to the other app and all these things? Another is my history, like what I've done. And another is like my preferences that I've told you, that, as opposed to just learning. So a lot of those things you built in natively because that was your original vision. So talk a little bit about how you think of assistants, like the general purpose assistants, which are generic, and what a lot of people are sort of building towards in terms of that, versus the personalized and how that might lead to a different type of future, the way we think about it.
Yeah, perfect. So definitely conversation, context, and you want an assistant who knows you both not only locally, that I just told you that a second ago, but kind of over time. And you want it sort of global across services. If I say, find me restaurants near my house, and it says, well, where do you live? Do you want me to remember that? I should be able to say, find movies near my house.
Right.
But today, where you have a very fragmented market and a lot of the other assistants where each skill or service is basically that you give it a string and it gives you back a string, feels very fragmented. So Bixby and Viv created a very rich platform where literally AI writes the code for every use case for you. Well, what's the benefit? There are many benefits, but one is gives a consistent experience to the user, makes it feel like one assistant, no matter what domain it is.
And you always know they can connect to other services, right?
Exactly, and for instance, every time the assistant needs to ask you a question, it's driven by the platform. And you have machine learning can be applied on every request, every interaction, so that over time it won't ask you that question anymore. And users know that if it ever guesses wrong or they have a different context, they can go and change that. in a unified place.
The user profile is always available
It's
to every,
always available,
to every
and
capsule, to
it's
everything.
completely consistent, right, across every domain or service. So yeah, so I would say we have the most sophisticated platform and developer tools available to third parties. Our focus is empowering the community. We are betting our success on the success of third-party developers, not on what we hardwire in ourselves, and I think that's one of the big differentiators. And so we launched the tools in November, they're freely downloadable at bixbydevelopers.com, and we now have an open marketplace, so anyone with those tools can build what we call a capsule that will really have a new interaction with end users. It'll be a completely different interaction for developers, and we hope that this will funnel more traffic to third parties than on any other platform.
So one concern that I've heard from third parties is to say, in the Bixby environment, if it's all Bixby and then what I build is in the background, how does my brand get exposed? Like, how do people know that I'm the one? Is there the concept of an explicit invocation? Is there the concept of making sure that people know which brands are interacting with?
So we care strongly about the brands. At every point, we highlight the brands through. We're phone first, mobile first, so every experience you have a big logo that you've defined. So you say, what's the best restaurant near here? It's not an aggregate like the old Siri app was. It says, Yelp says, this is Yelp's list. And they get to define the experience that they want, and using all the knowledge they have about personalization, et cetera. So we do highlight brands. In the audio speaker-only space, it's a little bit trickier to get that right, but you have complete control over how you do that as a brand.
Okay, so 25 years, you and I had a good conversation. By the way, Adam and I, we like a 45, 50-minute podcast interview when you did the formal announcement last fall, so check that out at voicebot.ai/podcast, so you can select it there. But did you think it would take that long? How long, realistically, did you think it would take for your vision to become what it is today?
So my mentor at SRI was a guy named Doug Engelbart, who invented the mouse, multiple windows, etc. He did this in 1968, showed the world what computing would be, and he had a vision. He died just a few years ago, and I think he felt like he didn't actually, in his 50, 60 years of work, didn't achieve the vision he was set out for. I just want to achieve the vision before I die or stop working. And I think I can get there. We're getting close with the marketplace in a scalable way that we're opening up through Bixby. It's not everything we want it to be, but it is squarely in the direction that I've always wanted to go. We'll see if the world likes it, if developers like it, and if it truly meets the promise of what I imagined. But I think we'll know within the next few years. So now's the time to give it a shot, and so here's hoping. So I don't know if I expected it would take 25 years, but as long as it doesn't take more than, say, 50, I'll be happy.
Well, I was going to say, the generational change, you're still within 30 years, so you're doing pretty well.
Absolutely.
Adam Chire?
All right,
thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And so check out all of the Voice 19 live stream videos, and with Adam Chire, Ron Crome, we've got other guests coming up as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Brett Kinsella from VoiceBot.ai. I'm here for another interview at Voice 19. We are in Newark, New Jersey, at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, something this man sitting next to me knows a little bit about.
Yeah.
He was our opening keynote speaker yesterday from Amazon Alexa, David Spitsky. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's great seeing you.
All right, well, what we're trying to do with this series here is we've had a couple of other guests really talk about 25, 30 years of voice technology and how we arrived at where we are today.
Yeah.
And you and your company have a significant role to play in that. So maybe you weren't in the 90s or the 2000s. You personally have a little experience.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I talked a little bit about this in the keynote yesterday. It's just serendipity that I happened to go to school here. And I was talking to my old professor. I remember walking around, this building didn't even exist, but this was in 92.
Right.
We had 386s, which was great. All freshmen got 386s.
Oh, yeah.
And
those things were amazing.
Yeah, and it was like, a lot of it was like Sun workstations. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And like a VAX VMS system. And there was a computer vision lab.
Yeah.
So I remember walking around and people were talking, this is almost 30 years ago, about computer vision and machine learning. But we just didn't have the compute power and we didn't have the storage to be able to do how we're building these networks today, right? And so it's really great to be back here now at this time and kind of see how that's been, how that's progressed, right, in 3 decades.
Yeah, so I think about this, like, we had Ron Crone on from Nuance and we talked about sort of the rise of speech recognition. And his thing is the big surprise about speech recognition in IVR was that it actually worked, right?
Yeah.
Because it had always been in the lab before and no one had ever productized it. And that was really important. And a lot of that was built upon when we saw Adam Dreyer and the launch of Siri. But we also saw some of the people that worked on those systems in the past were the original engineers working on a product called Alexa.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of super smart people at that are part of the Alexa scientist team that are working on things. And yeah, it's like, if you think about it, right? Think like 5 years ago, if we ever talked with technology, it was a device. We were either sitting down in front of a computer or we were pulling out a mobile device, but there was no idea of just talking to the air. And now that's a pretty common thing, the whole idea of ambient computing. And that was an area where Amazon, we had to create, you know, I mean, you talk about, I used to talk about this all the time, like the Beam microphone technology and how Alexa can hear you across the room. And now people are like, yeah, I expect that. I expect that she can hear me and I don't remember even what I'm asking. And so it's exactly what you said. It's actually become part of the everyone's every day. And that's one of the things I talked about in the keynote too, is to think about what does that day look like. If, 5 years ago, we didn't have that morning kind of ritual with the way ambient computing comes with, right? There's a lot of people I talk to, myself included, is I start out with, what's the weather like? Give me my flash briefing, right? Depending on
It's a new routine.
Yeah, it is a new routine. And there's also areas in the day now where I'll pull music. And I'm also a big fan of Prime Music with doing lyrics because I never remember the names of songs. And that didn't exist before either. And I, somebody that's pretty reflective, I love playing like the top 40s from different years. So I'll be like, play the hits from '87 when I'm driving. And music is like, it connects to memory unlike anything else, So you're seeing that too in ways that we didn't have, where we were browsing lists of music and stuff like that before. And to see that happen in 5 years is kind of incredible, really, to see that.
And I'm really glad that you talked about this idea that voice is not device dependent, and the previous computing paradigms were. When we talked about that at a voice strategy workshop a couple days ago, and you talk about the web era, it was the PC, the laptop later, but it was really the PC initially when we had the web, and then we went to mobile and it was the mobile device, and you didn't have the mobile experience except for on the mobile device, and it was a little bit of that. Some people tried to move it across surfaces, but it didn't really happen. And now with voice, it's across all devices. And you know what it reminds me of is I remember, I want to say it was the chairman of Nokia back in the late 90s, said, and this was at a time when we were first getting mobile phones, feature phones, what we call them today, and they were becoming ubiquitous, people had it. He said, most people just don't understand what's happening. Up until today, like maybe this was 1997 or something like that, he said, if you want to reach a person, you call a place.
Right.
Going forward, you'll call the person to reach them.
Yeah.
Because they'll always be connected.
Yeah.
And when I think about the accessibility of computing, it's like the flip side of that. In the past, if you wanted information, if you wanted digital engagement, you went to a thing.
Yeah.
Now those things are all around you, you just say it.
Yeah, I love it because it puts the human being back at the center.
Yeah.
Remember
That's right.
And maybe this is even going back a decade, but I remember everything was like the digital hub. So the desktop's the digital hub, and it's multimedia and all those kind of things. And I was always like, no, it should be about me, right? I don't want to have to go to the computer. But we were limited to those type of things. And the affordances that speech give, I like to think of it this way. I like to think of voice as the new HTML. And so all the technology in my life, it's just the way I'm going to communicate with that, but it's not the content.
Right.
It's not what I'm trying to get at. And much the same way with the rise of the internet, right? We had a browser, and the browser, as long as somebody had a browser, suddenly they could connect to all these brands and all of these other people all across the internet. But it's other things like social media and sharing pictures and music and all of these other things that bubbled up that we were interested in. And that's what I think is really exciting when you look at, if we're going to use voice as the way that we're going to communicate with all these things, then we're not leaving people behind. And my parents are older, and they've never had a smartphone. And so it was, if I called them, it was on a landline, And my dad, it's like my mom prints out emails, But now I can drop in. It's like what you're saying with Alexa, I can do drop in. And what that has done is they don't have to feel like just because they don't understand how an interface that some engineer built.
That's right.
That they can't use the tech. Now they can all use the tech.
Right, because they know how to talk.
Yeah, and so if you think about that, right, we've never had that in the history of tech, as far as I remember. There's never been an interface where just everybody was actually part of it.
Right, you didn't really have to be trained on it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this though in terms of ambient, because I think about, we start with this idea of the arc of speech and voice technology over 20 or 30 years, and Siri was really important. We were just talking about that with Adam because it introduced people to this idea of a scalable assistant that everyone could access.
Yeah.
And it could do a number of different things. It wasn't as, wasn't maybe as visionary as some of the things that people had demoed 10 years earlier,
right.
But it was the first thing that was really productized. And I look at Alexa, and I didn't get this when it first came out.
Right.
It took me about a year, and then it's like the light bulb went off. Oh, this is completely different because it's not just this idea of, as you said, go to a device, but it's unbounded. I can do anything, it's wherever I am. And I think about Amazon, a lot of people think of Alexa being the innovation, the assistant, and sure, innovative, capable assistant.
Right.
But the whole idea of taking it to the ambient environment, completely new. The only thing that was close to that before was the car with some of the voice systems, but those were not assistant-like, those were just voice navigation.
Yeah, and a lot of them are push to talk. I mean, it is in my car, which is why I had for years, before I got my Echo Auto, is I had a Garmin Speak. Just because it was easy to pull up podcasts by saying it, right? Yeah. And that happens really quickly versus holding a button or tapping,
Right.
So the whole idea is, with ambient computing, is that it doesn't matter where the computing power is, as long as I can go ahead and speak to it. Like, I was just seeing, I don't know if you've seen that this week, where people have the new they like eyeglasses, they're headphones from Bose.
Oh yeah, sure.
Right, so you don't hear anything. And what the first thing I thought about with that? Because you travel like me a lot. When you're walking around the city and you don't want people to engage with you, what do? What's the social cue? Right?
Headphones.
It
is a wonderful
right.
device.
And so what does that mean when we're in this world where we start to see people talking all over the place, right? And there's new tech out there that you'll see a lot in the startup world where it's induction through the bone, or you'll see stuff from Elon Musk where that's actually a voice device as well. It's just looking at the center of the brain that's actually forming language, right? And so it's just all different ways of getting that language forward. But I completely agree with you. It doesn't matter where the device is. And me, this is just a Dave thing. Like when I look out in the future, I imagine a world where like these devices are smaller and smaller and smaller. So ambient may be like this wall behind us, or it could be like the tie tack we're wearing, right? Like the button on here, that we don't really worry about carrying that. I think our grandkids are going to laugh at us that we carried around this computer in our pocket all the time. this phone.
I laugh at us for doing that. I mean, it drives me nuts. They keep getting bigger and bigger, and I understand the big screen has these values, but most of the time I don't actually want something that large.
Yeah, and there are certain things now that I do not pick out my phone for. A lot of them are, I don't know about you, but a lot of them are fitness related. So with wearables and other things. I talked about this in my keynote a little bit too, is that I'm seeing now, because we do have multiple devices and we have the ability to call our assistant from anywhere, I use this app called MyFitnessPal, which is available all over the place. And I was logging in my calories for the day and it was like, hey, by the way, we've got an Alexa skill. And I didn't even know, because there's so many skills.
It was good that they promoted that.
Yeah,
that they told you.
And that's an awesome way, right? Because that's a way to actually increase customer engagement. If people are using your mobile app, and I start to ask how many calories I have when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm doing an email, and imagine how much faster that is now, because once I'm opening up the app, I feel like I've switched my brain to now I'm like looking at how bad I've eaten for the day. Versus just saying how many calories do I have left. I can continue on with what I'm doing. So that's really what ambient computing is the ability to get to those things wherever you are.
Yep. So, sorry about that. We had a little
technical glitch.
Well, there's a little issue here with some of the people with the camera, but so if we think about where this is going to head, so this is obviously a really significant advance, and now a lot of other people have gotten into the market.
Yep.
But one of the things we see is that there's a set of habits and routines that people are readily adopting, and then there's some others that they aren't. And we talk about 90,000 skills and things like that.
Yep.
And you talk about MyFitnessPal. So that's not one of them. That's not a timer. That's not an alarm. That's not weather. That's not music, right? So that's one of those other ones. So what are some of those other behaviors that you see rising up right now in the voice space that people are actually incorporating into their daily routine?
Well, it's personal, right? So it depends on who I'm talking to. And I love hearing like what skills they've enabled and what's your favorite skill. In fact, I used to do that on the podcast. You remember when I had people, I was like, what's your favorite skill that you're using? And that's how I would learn about things. But what we're seeing actually at Amazon is there's what you would expect. There's a lot with music. There's a lot with smart home, but ambient skills, right? That lifestyle and gaming.
Right.
And when you think about it, so me, as somebody who's been gaming since I was a little kid, I started to think about the modality of gaming, right? Because when I'm at home, I'm using a console or I'm on my PC, right? And then a mobile game I usually have with me, and it's a different type of game, and depending on the environment I'm using. But what struck me about maybe a year ago, all the driving that I do, so I was driving down to DC, and I had my Alexa device in the car, and I got through my podcast, and I have a tendency, after I'm done with my podcast, my Audible books are very nonfiction. So there's only so much my brain can take where I'm like, I need to process this. And I'm like, man, I'm bored. I'm like, wait a minute, there's all these games. I started playing Song Quiz and Westworld and Skyrim, and I really enjoyed it. And I started talking to other people, and I'm like, wait a minute, I think there's a huge modality here of being in the car, because when you think about gaming and ambient too, it can be communal.
Right.
And if you have kids that are shouting from the back seat and they want to play something, it's like play the I see what color car game, but actually engage with that. And so we're seeing more of those type of things. And in fact, on the keynote yesterday, I did an announcement around a tool that actually helps build those interactive fiction, where we had Doppio Games and Electronic Arts talking about that. And so we're starting to see, and customers love games, you can look at some of these game skills, they have over 10,000 reviews.
That's right.
And through in-scale purchasing now, we're seeing developers making thousands a month. Some of them are making over 10,000 a month. So there are ways to actually monetize even in these early days with these type of skills. So I see that as an exciting area.
So you think gaming is like one of those areas that's
it kind of hit me, because I think it's that modality, right? I don't know if I would necessarily do it at home, and there may be people that want to do it at home in like I do trivia. There's another one called Hanagram, where it's like guess the letter and scramble. I will do that. It's like playing the old board games with the family and stuff. But yeah, that really hit. And we've had over 1 million pre-orders for the Echo Auto devices. So I'm super excited to kind of see how that engages. Now, taking, looking at that time of the day, that where are people engaging with this ambient computing? I hop in my car, maybe that's something to do in the morning, is that you suddenly have this routine where you're playing this game in the morning and then you're waiting to see the high scores on your commute home, right? And that's a modality that we haven't seen before.
Right. Well, and I think we think of it, there's a couple different things when I think about gaming, right? So one is you made this concept, or you introduced the idea of a communal game.
Yep.
And what we used to only have communal games.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I guess you could play solitaire, but it was
Right.
mostly like we had
real world
physical
analog
game,
is
or
almost
we were
all
throwing
analog,
horseshoes or something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we were together with people, and everyone could observe it. They could participate or not. And we got away from that because we went digital, and we were either sitting at a desktop or a console or a phone.
Yep.
Right. And so everything became personal, and they layered on this idea of communal. And maybe you're sitting in the same room, but you had headsets
still like
on,
this,
and,
yeah.
and you were not really engaging.
Yeah. And meant split screen, even consoles, split screen was a thing.
Oh, yeah,
you're
that's
sitting next to each other. It's like
But I'm
hardly
only
any
looking
games.
at this.
Yeah.
For Mario Kart, I'm only in the upper
Exactly,
right-hand corner. Right?
yeah.
So if I think about some of the games in the trivia, for example, you're bringing it back to this idea of communal. Like you can play Heads Up, or you can play Jeopardy or something with a little group. Song quiz is very popular. But I also think about voice as a complement. So I was really interested in what Call of Duty did.
Yeah.
I think it was last year, early this year. I think it was actually middle of last year, actually. But they have this coach.
Yeah.
So you can say while you're playing, you're on your console.
Oh yeah.
And you can just say, Alexa ask Call of Duty coach. I don't remember what the invocation is, but it basically will say, oh, you should do this, or you're using the wrong weapon for this.
Yeah.
And it'll make you better.
And Destiny as well.
Yeah.
So the ability, because you think about it, it's like very competitive, and I play a lot of these games too. And so to like pull up a high score, but even tips, like there are some Alexa skills out there that are on Fortnite. I don't know if you're familiar with Fortnite, hugely popular, my kids play it. Sure. And then getting tips and things like that for Fortnite skills, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of Fortnite skills.
Yeah, and so that...
And you had someone on the Evangelist team in Europe built some sort of weird integration with Fortnite.
Yeah,
where they could
I remember
do, like,
that tweet.
gestures and talking. And
Yeah.
they could actually do things much faster. They got better at the game.
Yeah, people were experimenting, because that's huge. Like if you go on YouTube and Twitch, it's watching people that have gotten really good at this. And so how do you improve your game? How do you get better at what you do? So even having flash briefings, like I talked to somebody, I don't know if the skill is live yet, but they had stickers, so I won't mention any names, but it was a famous YouTuber, and they have an Alexa skill now, and I'm like, get in the flash briefing. Like just talk to your audience every morning like, this is what I want you to practice today, right? Yeah. So I could be in front of my console, but yet I'm getting information on how to do things. I think that's incredibly powerful. And I go back far enough, when I was at Microsoft and in other previous jobs, a lot what I did was working with indie devs and looking at what is multi-screen. Remember multi-screen? It was like we're all going to have tablets while we're in front of the console and controlling one and doing others. And I worked a little bit on Kinect and how's that? And so voice is super powerful. Like imagine you're going through, it could be a shooter or a role-playing game, but just saying load slot A, like load whatever thing you have for this gun, change weapon.
Or pick the weapon.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through three steps to get to the weapon you want. You just
or sort by. It's like a role-playing game and you want to sell stuff, sort this by weight, right? It's like you want to sell all the stuff to free up bags. I think that is, it's just natural, just the ability to use that. But it's not replacing the controller. And that's one of the things that I try and remind people of is like, we've gone through so many technical waves where everything was, this is replacing this. Right. And voice isn't replacing. That's why the term voice first, right? It's exactly what you said. It's an additive onto it. What does it mean if I hold a controller in my hands, but I can also ask for things? Right? What does it mean if I'm in front of a device when I can see things and I can touch them, but I can also ask for things, right? So it's very complementary.
All right, I want to ask you about another concept. So I think about a conversation I had a while back with John Gilliland from Bond.fm, and he had a different take when he first saw Alexa. I think a lot of us, when we saw the assistant capabilities, here are all the things it can do, task, execution, and he looked and he said, oh, this is like the new YouTube. This is a new way to create engagement and to push content. So have you thought about that, or how do you think about that in terms of Alexa, or voice assistants in general, is a content publishing and interactive engagement platform versus a task execution or get things done platform?
Well, I think that gets back to it's super interesting, and you remember these days. So because Alexa launched with Echo, in the beginning it was this smart speaker. And people would say Echo, they wouldn't say Alexa. So obviously it was all about tasks because that's what people were thinking about. In fact, when we launched, we didn't have the Alexa Skills Kit. That wasn't until I think July 2015. And when we launched that, we also launched it with the Alexa voice service that said, wait a minute, what about if it's not just speakers? What about if we could put Alexa into anything? And it could be software. For example, there's an Alexa app on Windows 10, and it's even hands-free now. So as long as you have that running, you're talking with Alexa and you're talking to your computer. I actually have one on my Mac. It's in the App Store. Then you can talk to Alexa too, because that's using. I know there's actually 2 or 3 of them in the App Store because of the Alexa voice service. It's using that.
Makes sense,
And it's just because I get used to it, and I might not have a device around with me. And so I think when you start to think about those scenarios of having the ability of a device or screen, this is by the way why we made the Alexa presentation language, or APL, is that the paradigm in mobile is that every screen, and I came from a mobile background, every screen was a certain dimension. But that's not the case in voice first. A screen could be a button.
The screen is device independent.
What's a screen, right? And so what does that mean, and how do you display, and should you as the actual creator of that content worry about that? Shouldn't there be some type of deep learning that can understand what it means? If I say play and it's a device with a screen, that might mean a video, but if there's no screen, play probably means music. Or maybe it means a game, and maybe it's based on the content that I have. So as all of those things come together, what John was talking about, I think it starts to put the ideas in your head. Now, what's got me excited, I want to talk about the YouTube idea a little bit too, because this is what's got me excited. In my job, I get to talk to a whole bunch of different people from all types of backgrounds, and I won't say the brand, but they have a ton of old radio content. And there is a demographic that's what they grew up on, who desperately wants to listen to that again. And in fact, there was personas that came out of that, of people who were on radio, a voice for radio, of those type of things. So what does it mean when that generation can share stories? For example, my friend, we're doing this other podcast together, and one of the things he mentioned on a recent episode was his family in World War II talked about, and these are all private tapes, what it was like day to day, what his family went through. Imagine all of that that's locked away in generations who are getting older now, who have had this incredible barrier to tech. What does it mean in a voice-first world? They can start to be able to share that content, right? And I would love to see a day when there are skills out there where I could be, and this is just a hypothetical example, but let's say I'm traveling and I'm in a city I've never been. I've never been to Yellowstone. I want to go to Yellowstone. And I'm like, tell me a story of somebody who hiked Yellowstone in 1924 or something, right? And I can immediately get to that. And so that's combining everything. That's combining the idea of ambient computing, the idea of like using deep learning to actually know who I am as Dave and what I care about. But it's also looking at data getting tagged and all these neural networks being out where I can just pull in information. And then the YouTube idea of that, there's all these people, because as easy as YouTube is, it's still hard for people to go create a video and create a podcast and to publish it. But now the ability to actually share that.
And it's hard to find out what's in the middle of that. So if it's a 10-minute video, what you want is at 4:32.
Right, and everybody puts the thumbnail to try and get you. So it's like discoverability, the onus has been on us as human beings. But through deep learning and as AI starts to get more and more integrated, we're going to surface even stuff we forgot, right? Like you see an old friend and you reminisce and you're like, remember when you did this? Like, I have no memory that I did that. But imagine if that could get recalled and you're thinking of a certain topic and your assistant is like, hey Dave, by the way, 10 years ago, you remember when you said this? So it's enhancing this as well. So that's what's got me excited. And it's super early, it's day one, but I think as we go along, you see different expectations. You've already seen that in Alexa with people in skills. Like, go read some of the reviews. People are like, I want this. Even in financial apps, I want it to do this. I want this now. How about this? And there's an actual.
You can see the original reviews if you look at things that have been out for a few years.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, this is wonderful, thank you, I like it. And then like a year later, it's like, I can't believe you don't have this feature. Why did you even publish this thing?
Right.
Just different level of
And that's one of the things I tell brands is I go, it's 2019, it's not 2014. So the first thing you need to do, there are categories on the site, is you need to go in the categories and go look at them.
And go look at the reviews. I just did this in the strategy workshop.
Good.
I said, hey, how many of you looked at the reviews of your competitive skills and apps? And if you haven't, that'll tell you what to avoid, what to add.
Yeah, and there are companies like Capital One that part of their usability studies, I mean, they have usability labs, but part of it is going through the reviews and incorporating that actually into their development cycle now.
Okay, so Amazon likes to talk about day one, but the other thing we hear about a lot around Alexa is Alexa Everywhere.
Right.
So Alexa Everywhere is a strategy. So I think about the idea of the smart speaker is a great way to create a presence in the home, a digital presence that you did. But you've been going to all these other surfaces. Do you expect that a consumer is going to be hitting Alexa on 5 different devices a day? Is it going to be, how much is going to be on the phone eventually? I mean, where are you seeing it? And I know there's a big focus on automotive right now, but in general, how are you thinking about this idea of, okay, we put Alexa everywhere, but then how do people actually use it? And then how does that change the way they incorporate new behaviors into their day?
Yeah, so it means it's anywhere you want it as a human being, right? And so that doesn't mean those devices are even coming from Amazon, right? It means as a consumer, if I like, for example, for me, I have a pair of Bose headphones, and I love the noise canceling on it. Right. But I'm on the plane and I want to ask Alexa a question, right? So it's suddenly I have that type of.
Do you have cloud connectivity from the plane?
I do now. I won't say my carrier, but they actually. It is a carrier now that put Wi-Fi on every single plane now in the entire fleet. So it's actually pretty cool. I shouldn't tell people this, so they can get I'm like, I can't do email, right? Yeah. But it is consumer driven. It's customer driven. What do they want to see, and how do they want to engage? And by the way, it's not just Alexa. Like Jeff Bezos has said this, is that we're in this golden age of AI. And there are going to be hundreds of different assistants out there. I happen to like using Alexa, right? And so you're all going to go to the assistant that you find the most useful, right? But I think people, as we move through time, you're going to buy you could buy whatever kind of consumer electronics. It's going to have something in there. There's just going to be AI, and
I believe there will be thousands of assistants.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Capital One. They have their own assistant called Eno.
Yep.
And they're also available on Alexa.
Yeah, and Bank of America has Erica.
Exactly.
And I think, as human beings, nothing beats speed. So I think we're going to be like, Alexa, you talk to all of them. Yeah. Or at least that's what I would do. I like to try to simplify. But there's going to get a point, and you're starting to see this actually, you mentioned auto, you're starting to see this in auto, where there's you'll see this on our blog, there's a survey that came out where people are now making decisions on car purchases based on the smart assistant that's in the car. Right, yeah. And I know I did that personally. I would not buy a car now where I didn't have integration with the second screen in the car just because of the travel and how important that is to me. I think as time goes on, you'll see people doing that and saying, why would I buy a car that doesn't have that? Why would I go to a hotel where I can't? Here's something interesting. I'm just going to anecdotally, somebody at the conference told me this yesterday, and I thought this was super neat, because I love hearing all the little things, right? So I hear things like people bringing Echo Dots and stuff. Somebody told me yesterday that what they bring is Wi-Fi enabled bulbs. Now you can get these smart bulbs off of, I get them like for $20. Yeah. They bring them with them to the room. So they bring 2 of them and they can say, Alexa, lights off, lights on. I'm like, I'm going to start doing this because I go through where
you're going to travel with light bulbs now.
I'm going to travel with light bulbs, man. I'm going to try it because the bulbs can be big. There's even smart plugs, so maybe even do the smart plugs and then put the lamp in, which would be the next logical step. But I don't know about you. You talk about routines. I read my tablet. I'm checking Reddit and I'm checking other things before I go to bed, or maybe I'm reading a book, and then it's Alexa, shut off the lights. And to get up and hit the hotel light is different, right? So it's all of those type of things, but imagine if a hotel has Alexa integrated into it already, you'll see more. Or a restaurant, or the ability to just get to information on your phone. Like I've heard from a couple people at this conference that are like, Dave, I've been on the waiting list for Echo Auto for a long time,
right.
And I keep the Alexa app open the entire time when I'm in my car. So they're already using it, but they're using it through the hands-free.
And there's
Alexa.
other tools, there's other products. So just a final question, we're here in Newark at Voice 19. Amazon is not here because you're a graduate of NJIT.
Yeah.
Amazon believes that there's a good reason to be a title sponsor of this conference. What do you hope to get out of it?
It's, for Amazon, and I've said this, now I've said it for 5 years, people are probably tired of me, but we truly believe that voice is the next major disruption. And I think what I love about voice, and what we love about voice is you see this, it's cross-industry. It's an area where age is not stage. There are people here from 9 to 90, right? And it's incredible to kind of see that cross-pollination. You have marketers talking to entrepreneurs, talking to developers, talking to medical doctors, right? Talking to insurers, talking to people in the automotive, talking to game devs.
Right.
And I think you go to a lot of conferences like me, there's like the developer conference, there's the marketing conference, right? Or this is a community meetup. And voice is special because you're seeing all of that come together across, and it's enabling people, and it's very inclusive. So,
are you worried at all? Actually, there's been a little bit of talk about the Gartner hype cycle recently, and maybe we're heading
trial of disillusionment.
Yeah. Are you worried at all about that in this space? Is that happening? Has it happened? Is it going to happen?
Well, I think it's part of any normal cycle, right? So I shouldn't worry about whatever is part of a normal cycle. Whether we're in it or not, I guess it depends on who you're talking to. One of the interesting things I used to say how many people have an Alexa device, right? I've done that since 2014. But one of the interesting things I did in the keynote, and this was after reInvent, and you may have saw me do it. At reInvent, I went to the booth and I just went in line and talked to people.
Right.
And the biggest question that I got so much out of is, when did you get your first device?
Right, yeah.
Right? And, I work at Amazon, so I see numbers and I see all that, but I love just seeing in an audience, something like this, when did you get it? And there are people who got devices in 2014, and there were people in that audience who got their first Echo 6 months ago, raising their hand, right? And so that's...
Or a reInvent.
Or a reInvent, right? And so that's something that's super important, I think, to remember, is for that person, that's the start of the hype cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? That's the first time they're seeing that magic of playing any song they want and weather. And so I think we're so early on for like when people are buying these devices. And because I'm so involved with it, I tell myself that all the time. Dave, you've had this for 5 years, but try and think about the person that just bought that yesterday.
So I think that's perfect. So we just talked about, over an hour and a half or so, 3 different interviews. We talked about 30 years of voice technology.
Wow.
And what you've said is we're actually just at the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect way to conclude. So I want to tell the people viewing right now that Dave and I had a much longer podcast when I was in Seattle a couple months ago. So there's more about your background personally, and then also more detail about the Alexa journey. There's some different questions that we had today.
Yeah.
So definitely check that out, voicebot.ai/podcast. Just click the podcast tab. You'll be able to search for Isbisky. You'll be able to find him a couple months back. And thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing what Amazon's been doing.
Thank you, sir. Super appreciate it. Always good to see you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Welcome to the Voice Summit Livestream Expo stage. My name is Ian Utilli, and I'm honored to introduce our next two guests. I got to know you at the Alexa conference, which is in Chattanooga. It was in January. There'll be another one. This is Davis Park. Davis primarily is serving 5,000 people in the aging community looking for new technology that can serve them. And then we've just gotten to know each other. This is Derek Holt. And Derek, he's sourcing the great technology for the aging community. So one that looks to find tech for the aging community and one that's looking for tech for his aging community. So they are partners, and they're going to present the things that they found and the things that they're working on. I'm intrigued at what you're going to share. I look forward to it. So for all those that are tuned in online, thank you for your attention. To the Voice First FM community, to the Voice Summit AI community, to the Attention Live community, and others on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We know you're there. We're glad that you're tuned in. And for everybody here in the audience, we hope you enjoy this as we get started. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Davis Park, and I'll be co-presenting our conversation today with Derek Holt, who's the COO of K4 Connect, one of our partners that we're really excited to highlight and to share our learnings with. And so want to kind of first give a shout out to all the folks out there who are really looking for solutions and developing solutions and platforms that are really addressing this issue of aging, this huge crisis, but also an opportunity for us to kind of look at and explore like how we can use technology such as voice to address the needs of our aging population. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to have a little bit of conversations. We're going to have a little bit of background about why it is that why we're doing what we're doing. We're going to talk a little bit about the opportunity for impact and going to be doing a bit of a deep dive on how voice has really impacted one of our front porch communities and is making its rounds all throughout California. And then we're going to be talking about enabling senior-centric enterprise voice that Derek is going to take over and kind of talk about how voice is playing an important role in his company's solution. And then we want to kind of end with talking about a call for action, how we can use this as an opportunity, again, to address important needs of this really important population. So, to kind of give you a little bit of background about what it is that I do, Front Porch is a senior living provider based in California. We are a nonprofit that operates 10 full-service retirement communities and about 24 affordable housing. We touch about 5,000 lives daily. The work that I do specifically within the organization is to explore innovative use of technology to empower individuals to age and live well. We look at everything from virtual reality to robotic pets as caregiving companions. We're very excited about sensor technologies. We're looking at exergames, solutions that engage both mind, body, and social. And we also have done a number of different tests with telehealth and telemedicine. And so we are really about exploring the wide variety and swath of technology solutions to help develop an ecosystem of care that's technology enabled. So I'm going to kick it over to Derek.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Davis. Super excited to be here. As mentioned before, my name is Derek Holt. I'm the president and chief operating officer of a technology startup called K4 Connect. We're headquartered out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we think of ourselves ultimately as a mission-centered technology company that's really focused on building technology solutions for older adults, individuals living with disabilities, and those that care for them, whether that be family members, loved ones, great communities like Davis's, and everything in between. We've raised $27 million of venture capital to date. This is a massive market that is dramatically underserved, and we're super excited to be here to share a little bit more about the realities of the market. Always interesting to make sure there's a big market that we can make an impact around. And then to Davis's point, let's talk about how technology, but in particular, because we're here at the Voice Conference, what voice is doing and the impact it's having around removing some of the friction that has traditionally been around some of the technology adoption. So before we get into the results, let's talk about the realities of the aging demographics here domestically and then globally as well. So this seems, frankly, shocking to many. Every day in the United States of America, 10,000 people turn 65. Longevity, folks, it is not uncommon. In fact, in Davis's communities, probably used to be uncommon to find somebody who was 101 or 102 years old. It's not that odd these days. And this is really a lot to do with both the fact that the baby boom generation is kind of coming of age, but also the fact that medical care and longevity is broadly continuing to extend. Ultimately, we talk a lot about the boomers, but when you look at the communities that Davis and company run, we are at the beginning of what is going to be a massive growth in older adult population. This graphic is in the United States alone, where you've got 42 million people to 45 million today that are over the age of 65. In the next 20 or 30 years, that number is going to double, right? And you're hard-pressed to find any market from an age demographic that is going to double over the next 30 to 40 years. And yet, broadly at technology conferences, this topic is not discussed. Very, very rarely is it something that we think about. And I'm a computer engineer by training, spent time in big enterprise tech, and now I've done startups. And I'm almost embarrassed to say I spent most of my career building stuff for myself. That's what we do, right? Let's build developer tools for developers. Let's build technology for the next generation. The argument that we're going to make is there is both business opportunity and, just as importantly, social impact opportunity to really focus on the aging population. If you look at this, good news from a market opportunity, but ultimately, the United States is not the only country that's getting older. When you look at the globe, and this is a study that comes out every 5 years from the U.S. Census Bureau, the darker the color, the more an older population, right? If you look at the numbers. Today, the population of folks globally that's over the age of 65 is around 9%. This is what the world will look like in 2050. We will grow to over 17% over the age of 65. You've got countries, Japan's a really interesting one, where over 40% of the population is going to be over the age of 65. There are more people turning 65 than being born every day in many, many countries. And so for us, there's this huge opportunity to build technology that helps folks live vibrant, independent lives, deep into their years. And so, 1.5 billion, that's a pretty big market, pretty big opportunity. But as Davis mentioned, there's also challenges. In the United States alone, we will have a 300,000 person caregiver shortage, right? When you think about the needs, and this is a global challenge as well. And so what we want to look at, and it's interesting, I'm sure there's been conversations throughout the conference around how technology is going to take away jobs, right? Whether that's through removal of certain roles, or if we were at an autonomous conference, we'd be talking about the challenges of truck driving industry and cabs, et cetera, which are all very, very valid social discussions we should be having. But in this case, we just don't have enough people to care for the older population. And when I say care, it's not just medical care. It's about creating vibrant experiences. It's about continuous education, continuous development, and trying new things. And so we're super excited to be working with great organizations like Front Porch to really move the needle forward around what we believe is this notion that technology is going to both enhance and then, as technology has done, change, disrupt the way that we've traditionally looked at aging services or the longevity economy. And so to touch on some examples of how this is happening, like not in our imagination, but in real environments in the communities that Davis and the team are creating such great experiences for their residents around, I'll let Davis dive through some of the examples of where technology, but specifically voice, has really played an important role. Oh, you've got this one right there.
Thank you, Derek. So we will be talking. I want to talk now a little bit about a case study and opportunity for impact. And we first started looking at the Amazon Alexa not long after it came out. We saw immediately what the opportunities were. When we were looking at the review boards, there were people who are using their devices to help their aging parent who had Parkinson's. There are those who are using it to help people with disabilities. And so we saw immediately what the potential was. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at a case study. We wanted to pilot test this and really look to see what kind of measures we can develop to measure the impact. And so we looked at a number of different kinds of approaches towards doing this. And one of the most important things that's very key to our work is that we don't just bring a piece of technology, put it in front of someone, say, okay, this is great, see you later. It's really about the hand-holding, it's about the adoption, it's about the continued and sustained use of that technology and really finding something that's meaningful and powerful for that individual. So when we co-designed this with the residents of our population back in 2016, we got together with a group of residents and said, what's interesting to you? What's important to you? Where are your pain points? What excites you? Just on a general level. And then getting that feedback, we introduced them to the Amazon Echo and said, what do you think about this? And how can this apply to your lives? And there were lots of excitement. There are lots of really great enthusiasm about the potential for this technology. And this goes counter to a lot of people's thoughts about what do old people use technology for, and they don't use technology. Well, the truth is there's a huge amount of enthusiasm and excitement around technologies to help meet needs. It's all about how we can serve the people who use these things that meaningfully connect to their lives. So we got two groups. We got an Echo group and we got a Dot group. And the Echo group was part of our initial study, and they got training. They got a number of different kinds of adoption support. But there were so many people that were interested, we then had a group Dot that was kind of that ran parallel to our study. So as part of our adoption strategy, we incorporated talking about how to use their Alexa skills, about customizing their accounts, about messaging and calling. By the way, messaging and calling didn't actually exist back then. It actually came in the middle of our study, but we ended up incorporating that as well. Music and audiobooks are really, really important. And the cross-section of people who actually ended up using our devices included people with certain disabilities, or certain abilities that prevented them from using a computer, like, for example, tremors that prevented from using a keyboard. We had a number of people who had limited and low vision, people with limited mobilities. And so we had a really wide variety of folks who enrolled in our study. And what we found is, this is really no surprise, a vast majority of them used their devices for temperature, for what is the weather outside. A lot of them use it for timers and alarms. We had a number of people using it for news and other information. But these small things, what many of us take for granted, were immensely important to the people who adopted and used them. They didn't need to go shuffle for a newspaper and find out what today's weather was, or have to call the front desk for this information. This was really critical, especially when it came to using the reminders. And we found that people were actually using reminders to help them remember to take their medications. And they would say, Alexa, remind me to take the blue pill at 11 o'clock. So these were things that people were using on their own and finding use case scenarios for their devices. Other things were and there were some of the more sophisticated users were incorporating them into Google calendars or Outlook calendars and accessing their personal events that way. The second part of our pilot was incorporating a smart home accessories, and we really didn't know what we were going to come up with. We didn't know what the potential opportunities were. But when we tested this with our users, we found tremendous engagement and adoption. People were so excited to just simply be able to use their voice to turn off a lamp or to turn off the TV. We also gave people, they were essentially smart plugs, but we also gave them smart thermostats. We gave them remotes, Alexa remotes, because some people may not have the voice that would carry across the room, so they would just simply speak into their remotes and activate Alexa in more proximity. We had residents tell us, for 10 years, I've lived in this apartment, I've never been able to control a thermostat because I can't see the digital readout or I don't know what buttons I'm pushing. Now I can control it with my voice. This is independence. This is what it means to live in a way that lets them to live in a way that they want. there's a clip here, but let me just describe it because we don't have any sound. Essentially, this gentleman here is demonstrating the use of his Alexa to turn a lamp on and off in front of a camera person, a news organization that came out to film us. And he was so excited and so delighted to show off his device, and he named his lamp Happy. And he named his bedroom light Sleepy. That's because he and his wife were both theater actors, and so they got a lot of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs kind of sort of references. But that is also the power of this technology, which is the personalization. And when you get people and when you meet people where they are, what they want, and provide them with examples that touch their lives, they are going to use the technology. So in this second phase of the study, we found that 3/4 of the people use their devices at least once a day. And everyone in the study said that using their Alexa actually helped their lives, helped them live easier. And what surprised us was that almost 3/4, 70%, 71% of the respondents said that they felt more connected with their families, friends, and neighbors as a result of using this device and being a part of this project. So where we are today, that pilot was really seminal, we feel, in introducing voice-first technologies in senior living environments or any senior living arrangement. And we used that and built that to scale our adoption, and we now have over 300 homes that are using it. It's continuously growing across 6 of our front porch communities. We're also really drilling into the impact on social isolation. Social isolation, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, really is a huge epidemic, and we really need to address this. And if there's anything you walk away with today, it's the importance of helping people stay connected, because there's a wide variety of different core mobilities that are connected to being isolated. And we also want to explore voice as a platform for another number of different applications that address low vision and low hearing as well. So I'm going to kick it over to Derek.
That's great. So this all sounds fantastic, right? And the impact of voice, as well as smart home, as well as social software, as well as connected wellness devices, all of these things, I think it now becomes pretty obvious how the role that they have to play. But look, I have a computer engineering degree. My home still kind of shuts down every once in a while, right? And I've got to repair, and I've got to figure out why the Z-Wave doesn't talk to the Zigbee, and why Bluetooth is out of range, and all the things that come with it. And Davis, and frankly many communities across the country, when you're trying to do these things at enterprise scale, most of the time without large IT staffs, we saw an opportunity and frankly a barrier to allow and enable communities and older adults to have access to this technology. Not to any fault of their own, more that these things still are pretty hard to use, and most of the stuff is really DIY oriented, right? It's really about selling products to an individual and they hook it up in their own home. What if you had to support thousands of Alexas all from a central location? What if you had to support tens of thousands of smart thermostats and light switches? And ultimately, we saw this opportunity, and frankly, like any other good startup, you say, okay, well, what are the barriers? And there were a couple, right? Disparate products, as I touched on. Hey, we want to use the data to be helpful and to engage more effectively with those that we care for, but the data's in 50 different databases, right? So that's not going to be helpful. And then this whole notion of how do we take consumer products and put an enterprise layer on them so they can be managed, deployed, trained, and supported at scale, and so that Davis and the team don't have to turn into a 24/7 tech support and don't have to turn into a system integrator, right? And so ultimately, this is where we at K4 Connect saw an opportunity. We also saw an opportunity to do things a little bit differently. And so we really are, while a company focused on building solutions in this space, we are over 60% engineers. We have north of 25 patents now, none of which have anything specific to do for senior living, but rather around this enterprise layer to bring these devices together so they can be managed, deployed, integrated, and supported ultimately at scale. And so we had the opportunity to first focus on the tech. We call it Fusion OS. We think of this as the next generation operating system for a world of connected devices that are made by dozens of different manufacturers and speak at least 5 or 6 different wireless protocols here in 2019. Anytime there's 5 or 6 standards, I feel like there's no standard. And so that has been a benefit to us because it allows us to create some value. Number 2, and Davis touched on this, all of this has to be oriented around the older adult. It's got to be technology that they want to use every day. And that's really ultimately a key for us. Most of our staff do not fit into our end user demographic when I look at our team, or what we call our advocates. So we bring a lot of our users in. We are lucky enough to be working with 6 communities that are within a 5-mile radius of our headquarters. So we spend a lot of time with our end users. And then look, this stuff also has to make financial sense, right? Davis mentioned earlier that Front Porch is a phenomenal nonprofit that touches 5,000 lives every day. They do that, though, not to lose money, right? They want to sustain their mission to be able to touch more lives, and that comes down to using technology to drive efficiencies and allow them to do more great work with less capital, ideally. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about voice, but really what we do at K4 Connect is really soup to nuts this operating system for what we believe is the next generation of senior living. We call it smart communities. And that's everything from bringing smart home at an enterprise scale to connected wellness to engagement or some of the socialization elements that Davis touched on, and then really focusing on the ROI, helping teams within communities be more productive, helping them manage what are often millions of square footage of building, right? So this opportunity to bring into fruition the building management technology. And then finally, insight. So using the data to allow caregivers to do a better job, right? Allow family members to have a better sense of what's going on. And so interestingly, we've been following what Davis and the team have been doing for some time, but we started, as most did, back in 2015 before these smart voice capabilities started to become available. We started like you would expect, right, on smartphones and apps and desktops. And while, as mentioned before, this particular demographic has been, probably incorrectly kind of pigeonholed as they're not adopting a lot of technology. Reality is today, this is the fastest growing adoption of high-speed internet. You've got, I've seen studies that say as north of 75% of older adults are moving into communities with a smart device. So maybe 5-10 years ago that wasn't the case, but we saw this huge opportunity. And the reality is we saw amazing engagement. Daily, weekly active users, adoption rates that were in the 60, 70, 80% depending on the community, which would frankly compete with just about any software service that is consumer oriented. We saw that around engagement, we saw that around smart home, but we also were tracking this super friction-free interface that we're all here to talk about, which is voice. And so ultimately we brought voice in, and as Davis touched on, and we actually built a lot of our learnings on the work that they did, ultimately we started with what you'd start with. We have an enterprise platform to control smart homes, so we're able to plug and play from that perspective. There's some natural things that we inherit from the Amazon platform around communications and access to skills and other things. But then we wanted to teach Alexa about senior living, right? So what are the things that are accessible within the senior living environment? Well, it actually reminds you a lot of if you've been to a resort lately, or I'm actually going with my family to Disney, the first thing they tell you to do is download the app, right? And that's how you make reservations, that's how you request help, that's how you get more information. And within senior living communities, many of these are managing 6, 7 culinary experiences in one community. They have a social calendar that is much more vibrant than my social calendar. And there's just a lot to manage. There's classes you can go to, there's meetup opportunities, and again, a great opportunity to get the most out of your community. But the digital access to those capabilities just wasn't there. And so a lot of what you saw were paper-based. If I wanted transportation from a community, I had to take a piece of paper 24 hours in advance to the front desk to arrange transportation. Well, the residents that are moving to communities today are already using Uber, so that was not going to be something that was going to fly long term. And so we built a set of capabilities on top of voice technology that allows residents to not just control their smart home or call the front desk, but ask what events are today. Request maintenance, request food, understand what the daily specials are, call their neighbor, a whole bunch of really interesting collaborative capability once we taught the technology about the context of senior living. And so this was a natural evolution for us and really started to be able to do it at scale. And so back in fourth quarter of last year, we fully outfitted the first fully voice-enabled independent living community. This is a little bit more of an active community to have folks probably in their late 70s into their 80s. And then at the beginning of this year, we enabled the first fully assisted living community, and that was a community in California. And to give you a sense, I jumped ahead here a little much, sorry. To give you a sense, and this particular population, almost nobody had access to technology before, but right in line with what Davis highlighted, you had 73% adoption in a very high acuity environment. You had 72% daily, weekly active usage. You had hundreds of lights and smart thermostats and content accesses and interactions every single day. And so this really started to show that there's an opportunity to create a great value proposition, but also streamline staff workflows. So the notion, if you look at as a funny aside you wouldn't know unless you spend a lot of time in senior living communities, the number one reason people call the front desk is the mail here? By a 3x number compared to all the other reasons they call the front desk. Well, that feels like something we could automate, right? So now they ask Alexa, is the mail here? And Alexa will tell them yes or no based on whether the mail's been delivered. And so it's about bringing those types of capabilities that start to chip away at the repetitive tasks of the staff itself and starts to free them up for more and more of the interaction that Davis was talking about before. And so we were super excited when we got connected with Front Porch at the beginning of this year. We've been watching and having conversations for some time. We ran a pilot with one of their beautiful communities in Southern California, and the results were off the charts, very much in line with a lot of the stuff Davis mentioned before. The last thing I'll touch on before I hand it back to Davis is the importance of not just the technology making it seamless, but also the work that Davis and the team has spearheaded around continuous education. And so there's an enablement element, but there's also a virality to it. This is a community after all. And if you think about how you learn any new skill or new technology, often it was from a peer. And even in the technology space, right? I'll go to a Java meetup every once in a while or an AI meetup. These same principles of paying it forward apply very much in the senior living space as it does elsewhere. And so being thoughtful about those types of capabilities has really set us up for success and established a foundation on how you roll these things out. So I'm going to hand it back to Davis to talk a little bit about where we go from here.
Okay. Thanks, Derek. So the last piece that we want to kind of talk about is a call to action. What does this all mean, and why are we here? We're here to really talk about the needs of the communities that we're servicing on a daily basis. And when we look at the opportunity for voice, we see tremendous potential, and we're here to say it's important to pay attention. Please listen up. I want to kind of dig in a little bit into like some of the things that Derek had brought up a little earlier. This is a different demographic chart, and this charts out the world demographic in terms of those who are under 5 and those who are over 65. And for the very first time in human history, we are at that crossroads. As Derek had mentioned, there are going to be more of us in the 65 plus category and not enough of us to take care of those folks. So what do we turn to? That's where technology comes into play, and this is really critical, this piece, and we really hope that this is something that you walk away with here today. I mentioned a little bit about the importance of loneliness and how we really need to address it. There are a number of different kinds of concerns and issues that come attached that very highly correlated with social isolation and loneliness. And those two are, by the way, very different, but there are some overlaps. And we find increased health risks. We see increased fall risks. We see a huge impact, a huge financial impact on our economy and our caregiving system. Our healthcare really suffers greatly from this condition. So this is something that's very important for us to pay attention to. Another one is sedentary behavior. And the older that we get, the more we tend to just sit, the more we tend to not get up and about. And this has a number of different health and social consequences as well. And so there's a very high correlation, again, with mortality. So when we look at solutions, when we talk about how something like voice can really help to address these kinds of issues and concerns, we really need to look back at the research, because these are back data that demonstrate the importance of the demographics that we're serving. So disabilities and older adults, and just talking about abilities across the board, but particularly when we talk about older adults and those with disabilities, people tend to have a higher number of disabilities as we age, and this has tremendous implications. And if any of you have ever had like a bum foot, like maybe you've had a sprained ankle or you've broken a toe, you know like how difficult it is to just do the simplest things. Well, a lot of folks that we're serving like continue to live with these things, and those who have permanent disabilities live with them for the rest of their lives. So how can we make technology such as voice address these kinds of independence issues? One of the things that we had, that one of our residents told us when she got involved with our smart home project was, when I got the Alexa, I didn't think it was very much. It was a big deal. It was just kind of a toy to me. But when you brought in the smart light bulb, like this was the first time I've been able to operate a lamp without asking my husband in 10 years, because I can turn it on and off with my own voice. We've had people say, I feel safer walking to the bathroom at night because I just tell Alexa to turn on a light on my way to the restroom. So these are really important. These may be small, but they're very, very important and meaningful to the people who they make a difference, whose lives they make a difference in. And then there's another kind of world in aging that we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to, but really touch a lot of our lives, which are caregivers. And 4 in 10 caregivers describe their caregiving experiences as highly stressful. And if any of you have cared for a parent or an aging parent, you probably can feel some of this pain. 17% claim to have fair or poor health as a result of providing care to their loved one. And the more complex the care, the more stress and the more complicated that caregiver's health is. One of the things that we're really excited about right now in using and applying voice is how we can smartify, if you will, an experience, a multi-sensor experience. So take the smart home, take the colored light bulbs, take the Alexa-enabled aromatherapy device, and bring a multi-sensory environment to those who may be feeling anxious, to those who may be wandering in the middle of the night. So there are tremendous opportunities in using the power of voice in order for us to care for the needs of our population. So we want to thank you. We really appreciate your time, and we thank you for all that you do. Derek?
No, that's great. The last thing I would leave everybody with is ultimately a lot of the stuff that Davis is talking about is or could be perceived as a novelty for the next generation, right? The fact that I can turn my light bulbs on with my voice, interesting, but not changing my day-to-day interaction. I'm lucky enough to be able-bodied. But when we think about the demographics that we're currently serving, we cross that line between novelty and utility. And I think that's super, super critical when we think about the opportunities all of this technology has to play not just for the next generation, but for the current generation. And so we're super excited to be part of that. There's a whole bunch of other organizations doing amazing work, and we'd encourage folks to learn more about the space, because the tech you're working on might just have an opportunity to cross that chasm, right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Voice Summit. My name is Ian Utilli, and I am grateful for your attention. I'm here with Davis Park, and you are part of an innovation side of the house for Front Porch. Front Porch serves 5,000 elderly, and it's kind of your mission and task to find innovative tech, like voice tech, for these folks. For our short little kind of post-talk interview, what's the strong call to action? Like, if you could say one thing to the voice community, to the folks watching at voicefirst.fm, Voice First Summit, Attention.live, other places, what do you really want to communicate if it's one thing?
If it's one thing I want to communicate is a call for action for us to address the social isolation and wellness needs of older adults.
Yeah.
Social isolation represents a huge, massive problem in society, and there are people who are more and more disconnected from friends and family because of a number of issues. And what social isolation really is about is talking about loss. Whether it's a loss of a loved one, the loss of ability to walk, the loss of ability to see. And when we experience these losses, we disengage and we don't connect with others again. And that leads to a whole number of different health and economic problems.
You know, one thing I love about your site, now your company's Front Porch, but your site specifically for those interested is fpciw.org. It says there, for us, being for your organization that you lead, it's not what technology can do, but specifically it's what imagination can do with technology to empower people to live well. And you're serving the folks that, there's 10,000 every day in America that turn 65. These are the folks that you're serving to live well. Let's end this with one story. Tell me a story of how imagination combined with technology to empower a life, because you serve 5,000 different souls. Give me a story that might move a heart to really consider this as a calling.
Sure. So one of the things that, as we are bringing our Alexa devices to our residents during one of our deployments, I personally was in charge of this one home, and for sake of let's just call him Stan. So I went to Stan, and I introduced him to the device, and he clearly had some vision issues. He had trouble kind of seeing things around in front of him, and he also had a little bit of trouble hearing as well. And one of the things that we do is in order for us to help connect them with the technology and with their Alexa devices, that we ask them for their favorite sports team, what kind of news they listen to. And he was sitting in his chair and kind of didn't really look like he was kind of connecting with me or what it is that we were doing. And so I asked him, it's like, who's your favorite musician? And he kind of stopped for a second and he said, Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong, okay. So we embedded Pandora and we started streaming. And so I said, and we set that as one of the favorite stations. And I said, Alexa, play Louis Armstrong. And she started playing, and he just fell back in his chair and he started looking up the ceiling, and he was lost. He was just lost. And he was just completely in his element. And this is what it's about. It's about making that connection with people who may have lost something a long time ago.
Wow. So it reminded me, so now we're going to end with me telling a story. And after this, we'll say goodbye to the audience, and we'll be back with your partner, who you just did the conversation with, Derek Holt, the president and COO of K4 Connect. But before we get there, let me tell you what happened to me a couple weeks ago. I had considered putting a dozen Alexa devices in my parents' home for quite some time. I actually bought them several months ago. I had the nice brand new third version of the Dots with the thing that just goes right on the wall, and I had them set up in their office, and I don't know what it was. I think I felt like, it's going to take a lot of time and energy to set up. So I started the process, started in their bedroom, and I put 2 in every room, for a left and right sound. Right as I finished the setup of the first room, I started tearing up. I'm like, I'm super emotional about this right now. And my mom's gonna be 65 in November, and my dad will be 67 in January. So right at that age to transition to a new time in life.
So I set up another room or two. I go down to the garage. I started tearing up. I'm like, I can't believe it. I'm crying right now. I'm crying setting this tech up. And I'm asking myself the question as I go to like the fifth room. What is it about this that's making me so emotional? What is it that's causing my soul to respond in a way that I'm so overwhelmed that I'm like caught up in this emotional place? And I realized what it was is as I was setting it up and talking to it and it was communicating, what a difference it was going to make in my parents' lives. And it really did. Like, it's brought incredible joy. It's brought greater productivity. And it was, a profound experience. I'm kind of an emotional guy, so I guess I cry more often than most dudes. But it was interesting to have technology have that kind of impact. So anyways, for those that are tuning in, inspired by what both you and your partner are doing, in the talk you just did, and our brief conversation, I'm just a regular dude that doesn't dress regular. I likes to ride around on a hoverboard and interview 100 people at a conference, but I am just kind of a normal Santa Cruz guy. And setting this kind of tech up at my parents' home was a moment I won't forget. So, and I'm grateful for people like yourself and the folks that you work with that do this intentionally, on purpose, for those that don't call you family. So thank you so much for what you do, Davis.
Thank you.
I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll be back before you know it with Davis's partner. Welcome to the Voice Summit. My name is Ian Utilli. I am the CEO at Attention Live, and I'd like to say hello, future. Nice to meet you. I enjoyed your conversation. I'm glad that both of you came to communicate with the folks that are here and the folks that are tuned in online. For those on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, on the Voice Summit pages, the Voice First FM pages, mine, my company's, thanks for your attention. We appreciate it. This will be a very brief conversation. I just wanted you to have a moment to tell people about K4 Connect, and if there's one single call to action that you could leave people with, what is that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having us.
Yep.
Super inspired by the audience. There was a lot of energy around this really, really important topic. And so Davis Park from Front Porch and myself just got done talking about how technology can be used and leveraged to create great experiences for older adults. And we talked a lot about the fact that America and the world is getting older. And ultimately that's a really great thing, right? Developments in healthcare and the way we take care of ourselves is very positive, but there's also really big challenges and opportunities to use technology to help folks live a vibrant life. Right? We say simpler, healthier, and happier. So at K4 Connect, we're all about bridging that gap, right? We build technology solutions that empower older adults, individuals living with disabilities, and then also strive to create solutions that help those that care for them. Could be a senior living community, could be a family member, could be a home care group. So think everything from smart home to connected wellness to certainly voice. How do these innovations and technologies, what role do they have to play with older adults? Awesome. So for me, what we tried to share with the audience is, look, I've been in technology and an entrepreneur for some time. I'm almost embarrassed to say now I never thought about this end user. I would just encourage folks to think about this end user. It is a massive market. They're actually very tech savvy. They're very interested in learning new things. And this whole notion that older adults don't like technology is, I think, kind of
a cheap excuse. In the end, they may not like technology design for somebody 50 years their junior, but that's not their fault. That's our fault as entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah. Well, your site, K4, the number 4, so K as in, this is a killer web company, K4Connect.com to find out more. Your site says smart solutions for today's older adults, technology built to make life simpler, healthier, and happier. I was just telling Davis about my parents. I set up a dozen Alexa dots at their house, and I cried a couple times putting it all in. I thought of another story, and so since you're kind of serving that community, my parents are 64 and 66. I did the voice of the car song with Bradley Metrock. At the very, very end, I brought them up after I'd done, 30 interviews during that day. We did it at the NASDAQ Center. It was a really great day. And I just thought, my dad's a contractor, my mom is a real estate agent. I just thought I should ask them, like, what do you think? They weren't prepared.
Right.
And like, they had the most profound answers of how it would change their profession.
Yeah.
Like, they had really thought through, like, what would it be like if I could turn my car into a productivity machine instead of just a death trap?
Sure.
And my encouragement to people is, elderly have solutions if technologists would just ask them the right questions. And so let me just end our interview by saying, Derek, thank you so much for asking the elderly the right questions and for making a decision that you and your organization are going to serve these folks and do your best to serve them well.
We feel super lucky for the opportunity. And again, thanks for having us here. It's huge to shine a light on this opportunity more broadly.
It's great.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. I'll be right back with Magic & Co. Thank you. Welcome to the Voice Summit here at Newark, New Jersey. This is the Voice Tech Super Event, the largest in the universe. My name is Ian Utilli. I'm your host and the CEO of Attention Live. I'm here with my new friend, Gisela. Did I say it right?
Yes.
And you're a senior project manager
Correct.
at Magic & Co., Ben Fisher's company.
Yes.
So I got to know Ben in January at the Alexa conference. The case studies that he put forth before everybody I thought was super inspiring. And so maybe just tell folks that don't know about Magic & Co. What the organization is and what you're looking to, who you're looking to connect with.
Okay, so Magic & Company is one of the leading voice agencies. We work with different brands from healthcare, finance, product, food and beverage, and trying to expand and just let brands know that they should, step on the voice technology space and help them bridge that gap between them and the users.
That's awesome. Now, when you go to the site magicandcompany.com, you're doing all things for the connected home, all things for voice interface, for enterprise companies. Obviously, a lot of your clients are well-known organizations, but it says here, voice agency services, hardware, product development, AI, machine learning. I get the sense that as long as the project is ambitious enough, as long as it is meaningful enough, Ben's going to want to sit down and talk about it. Is that the case? Like, it's kind of like you're looking for people that really want to do something that is meaningful, going to make a difference, and those are the conversations that you want to have?
Yes, exactly. I mean, we do everything from, the creative process, coming up with ideas, brainstorming with what the client wants, and sometimes they don't even think about it, but we come up with the idea and they love it right on the spot. And then we make it happen. Sometimes they come with an idea already, a set idea, and if it's, like you said, ambitious and exciting and interesting, we like to be the ones developing it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with Magic & Co. to have that initial conversation to see, hey, what does this look like for us to work together?
I think the website, there's an email. I can give you, Ben's email, my email address.
I prefer Ben's personal cell phone number. I really like to have that. Send him some GIF images, some funny movement through text. No, but what is the best way? Is it going to the website, or is there an email? Is it ben@magicandcompany.com?
Yeah, exactly. Ben@magicandcompany.com or Gisela@magicandcompany.com.
Great. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave folks with? Maybe something inspiring, what's the call to action? What should they do besides get a hold of your company? What should they do in just the voice tech industry in general?
Well, one call to action is to go check out our voice search report that we just came out with.
That's what your shirts are, right?
Yeah, they're back. It's really great. It's a 40-page report, and it's super interesting and how brands are being found on voice.
That's great. And I'll be back with Bradley Metrock from Voice First Events, Voice First FM, Score Publishing. He's got a big world. I'm going to try to bring it down and have a fun conversation. Be back in just a moment. Thanks again for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the Voice Summit here in Newark, New Jersey, and I am here with my friend Bradley Metrock, also the founder of many things in the voice space. I guess you'd like to just be known as the CEO of Score Publishing and so many other brands. Bradley, thanks for joining me.
Ian, thank you for having me.
Thanks for inviting me into your world, which led to me getting to know Pete, led to me getting to know so many folks in this industry. It's an honor for me to have a place here. So
you do good work, man.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and talking to me now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll jump on the main stage and have a conversation in a moment. This is kind of the preemptive interview.
Okay.
We're live streaming to your Facebook and your, YouTube account.
Okay.
I think Twitter. So anything you want to say to your community? They're paying attention.
You know, the Voice Summit is a great event. It has taken a step up from last year when it was also a great event. There's a lot to see here. There's a lot to see and do. If you're interested in the space, if you're interested in voice technology, what it can do for you, interested in AI, voicesummit.ai is a good website to keep up with in this conference because it's just going to do nothing but grow from here. So it's been fun to see it. It's been fun to be part of it. And for people who follow what we do, it's a good thing to also keep up with.
Maybe we could end here before we go up on stage. Can you just tell people what's going to be different about Project Voice in January compared to, it's a rebrand of the Alexa conference last year.
It's the metamorphosis.
Yeah, so yeah, it's now a voice technology mega event.
It is.
Okay, not just Alexa.
Sure. So Project Voice is the voice technology mega event. It's the week after CES. There's going to be over 3,000 people there from 15 different countries. It's going to be profound. A really highly qualified audience. It's going to span every sector, every use case of what voice and AI is doing in our society, in our culture, in our company, in our home, everywhere, in the car, everywhere. And it's projectvoice.ai. And if you are tasked by your boss to learn about voice and bring that knowledge back to the organization, if you're part of a team that has that responsibility, if you're doing it for yourself, whatever's going on, that is the essential week for you to be in Chattanooga, Tennessee, home of the fastest internet in the United States, and invest that time so that you can get that real-time information and take that back to your organization, and that's the point of it. It's just going to be awesome.
It's great. In just a moment, Bradley and I will be on the main Expo live streaming stage, and we'll dive in with quite a bit more detail, hopefully some laughs.
Hey,
we're definitely going to laugh. It's up to you if you want to laugh. It's easy for us to laugh. We're going to enjoy it. Thank you for your attention. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Voice Summit here in Newark, New Jersey. We are at the Expo Hall live stream stage, and I'm with my friend Bradley Metrock and also my partner in VoiceFirst.tv, and you are partnered with Pete, who runs this event in VoiceFirst.community, and it's just a big collaborative group of people that are working hard to accelerate the voice community. So we just jumped off of the kind of pre-event stage, and now we're on this main stage here. Bradley, for folks that are listening, and that would be YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, all of your accounts, voicefirst.fm. So again, thank you for letting Pete stream this content to your channels, and Pete's channels and my own. Maybe introduce yourself to folks that just tuned in that don't know who you are.
Sure. Ian, thank you for having me. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of a company called Score Publishing based in Nashville, Tennessee. We have our hands in a lot of different things related to voice. We started 2.5 years ago something called Voice First FM, which is a podcast network oriented around voice technology and AI. Since we started it, it has now grown to be listened to in 56 countries by hundreds of thousands of people, predominantly tech professionals. We have something called the Voice First Events Series, which is a series of events, many of which are aligned around different verticals that take a look at the impact that voice and AI is having across a number of different sectors. We have one of those events is called Project Voice, which is sort of the counterpart to the Voice Summit here today. And we just rolled out earlier today something called VoiceFirst.community, which is a 501c6 trade association. You know, the common term is business league. It's a nonprofit entity designed to identify and then advocate for the shared goals, interest, vision of companies and individuals working in this growing space. So a lot going on. Happy to be sharing the stage with you. Thank you for giving me some of your time.
Yeah, of course. Why don't we walk through some of your events you have lined up from this week all the way through to January, right? It's kind of like an all-year road that leads. Obviously, since you did your event in January in Chattanooga, the Alexa conference, which is now developed and matured to Project Voice. We also did Voice of the Car Summit together in April at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. That's where you launched Voice First TV, Voice of Hospitality in Dallas with Michael Atkinson, who gave an incredible keynote talk there. He and I just did a fireside chat this afternoon.
Nice.
And now we have a string of events coming up, kind of a flurry of events the next couple of weeks.
Sure.
So I have this up on the screen. Why don't we first just talk about this? Let's just walk through one at a time.
Sure. So next up, next week, is a free webinar with Microsoft's Noelle LaCharity, who has a key role in that company's voice and AI initiatives. And she just started a separate side venture of her own as well called the AI Leadership Institute. She will be our guest on this webinar. It's free. However, there's only 20 or 30 spots left to sign up. So you go to voicefirstevents.com. It's at the top of the page, as you can see. Sign up for it because it will be sold out, filled up soon. So that's the one that's next up. After that, the week after that, there's two events, both of which are in Boston. The Voice of Healthcare Summit returns to Harvard Medical School. That's August 5th and 6th. And then the incredible lineup of speakers and participating companies that's going to grow in size over last year. The day after that, Wednesday, August the 7th, is the Voice of Education Summit. There's a shocking amount of stuff that voice and AI has impacted education. That's K-12, that's higher ed, that's professional learning already. And this event that is held at Boston's Emerson College will dive into a lot of that. Companies like Novel Effect, Matchbox.io, Columbia University is giving a talk. It's a great lineup there. Encourage people to check that out. That's voiceofedu.com, and all of these are on voicefirstevents.com. So after that concludes, we get into September. September 10th through the 12th is Digital Book World, which is a long-standing publishing event that has sort of this voice and AI component bolted onto it, but a lot of other traditional publishing things will be discussed there as well. Audible will be there, Kickstarter will be there, Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, Amazon Alexa will be there, a lot of different folks. And that's September 10th through the 12th with pre-conference workshops the day before. That's in Nashville. That will be sold out in all likelihood as well. Then we get into October. We've got 2 events. We got an online event called Voice of the Flash Briefing, which will be, I had to look back at my cheat sheet here, Thursday, October the 3rd. That's filling up. That's a who's who of who's doing work with flash briefings, which are just short form content delivered over Alexa or Google Assistant or different voice assistant smart speaker ecosystems. It's a pretty cheap ticket to sign up. It's like 30 or 40 bucks, and you get a copy of the video along with it. Later in October is the Voice of Money, which is all about how voice and AI impacts retail banking, credit unions, investment banking, corporate finance, risk management, and cryptocurrency. That's going to be in the downtown area of New York City at a very hip venue called Subculture. That's going to be completely sold out, just like Voice of the Car Summit was earlier. And then that brings us into January for Project Voice, the Voice Tech Mega event, the end-all be-all. If you're watching this, if I haven't bored you to death already, I just assume you're already signed up for Project Voice. It's going to be killer. 3,000 plus people there, probably more. A real showstopper. You got to get there for that. So that walks us through, the schedule on the foreseeable horizon, and there's something for everybody.
So the event that's coming up in Boston, there's a 2-day health event, which is the 3rd year or 2nd year?
2nd year.
Okay. And then there's the first Voice of Education, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the debut. It's the pilot of
That's
Voice
right.
of Education.
Like we just did the Voice of Hospitality.
That's right.
And the Voice of the Car was the debut.
That's right.
Right. So can you give people an idea, if they're in the voice industry in general, or they're interested in voice tech in general, does it make sense to come to both events?
Yes.
If they're in the health world, is there...
And let me stop you there.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about Mayo Clinic.
Please.
Mayo Clinic will be at the Voice of Healthcare Summit. They're going to be talking about many things, including aspects of how they have pioneered with Alexa in healthcare and some of the things that they're starting to shift gears and look at. But the thing about Mayo Clinic, they have a huge emphasis on content. And they've got an entire group of their organization called Mayo Content. And they spend a long time thinking about how to deploy content for educational purposes, either for, not really for K-12, but for either higher ed or professional lifelong learning. So almost by definition, if you're doing work with voice and AI, by definition, you've got some content that you need to deploy, some sort of educational slant that you can take on things. So if you're in Boston, both events will complement each other well, and both could easily be of interest.
Well, thanks for walking through these events with us. Can we just talk about the VoiceFirst.fm network?
Sure.
Because, interesting story. I don't know that a lot of people know the story, but, you hadn't jumped into the podcasting world, and you thought, it's probably too late. I'm a little late to the game. And then I believe it's a conversation with Gary Vaynerchuk that kind of led to him being like, it's not too late, man. The best time to plant a tree is 5 years ago, but plant the bad boy now.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about the beginning of things, and maybe we could walk through these, starting with the Alexa in Canada, Alexa podcast, and then we can kind of walk through and then talk a bit about your vision for the morphing of audio broadcasting from radio to kind of this archived format through podcasting.
Voice First FM, it's been fun to watch that grow. And in April 2017, I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Gary Vaynerchuk. Most people don't realize VaynerMedia and Gary have got offices in New York City. They've got offices out in the Bay Area. They've got offices in London. And they have an office in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The reason they have an office in Chattanooga, Tennessee is entirely because of a good friend of mine, Ted Alling, who's a big to-do there. He's made a bunch of money selling a company, supports a lot of accelerators and growth in the city. he politicked Gary to open that office, and he did. So one thing led to another, and I was able to go and meet with my friend Ted and be able to meet with Gary. And I asked Gary, it's April 2017 again, is it too late to start a podcast? No. Stop asking. Bad question. Go do it. And so I drove back to Nashville, and I not only started a podcast, I started Voice First FM. And 2.5 years later, it is a galvanizing force for knowledge and promotion and visibility in voice technology and AI. And we've had a who's who. This Week in Voice just wrapped up season 3 a couple of months ago, and Mark Cuban was my guest. That's how far it's come. And so I have Gary to thank in many ways, but it's beyond that. It's just, it's the way that it serves the community across 56 countries and these hundreds of thousands of people listening that's very gratifying. And that's the whole event series sprung out of that, and a lot of other things have sprung out of it too. And when you go to voicefirst.fm, we don't have to roll through all the podcasts now. There's a bunch of them on there. Check it out, because some are consistent in their delivery, and they've grown huge audiences. Like one is right there. Dr. Terry Fisher has been very successful with that. Others only have been for a short window of time. But the thing about it is that because it's dealing with this area of technology, a lot of this content is evergreen content, at least for the moment. We have people, we check the numbers, we see people all the time going back and listening to some of the podcasts that were the first ones we did back in 2017, just like they were brand new. So if you're into this space, if you're intrigued, if you're part of a company that's trying to learn about it, or you're knee deep in it already, avail yourself to the resources that are on Voice First FM, because you'll be glad that you did.
Any other, do you want to show, so there's Alexa in Canada, the Alexa podcast, there's artificial intelligence, Talk to Me, Voice of Health, Week in Voice, which is your primary podcast, the Voice First Health, Voice First Roundtable, VUX World, Voice Marketing. Are you welcoming people to add more podcasts to the FM network? Can you talk about the people out there that might be influencers that are developing an audience and maybe they want the umbrella of a larger brand? Like, is that an opportunity for people?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just added Smart Speakers, which is a flash briefing run by Peter Stewart over in London, who used to work for the BBC, maybe he still does. And we're looking for content all the time. And the relationship we have with podcasters and flash briefing creators through Voice First FM, it's, the way I describe it, it's a loose confederacy of like-minded people. And the way we describe it as well is it's better to go together than alone. Yeah. And so it's not anything with any sort of onerous terms. It's just people can walk away from us at any point, and we can walk away from them too. It's just the relationships have been enduring that we formed through this, because we can help bring visibility to podcasts, and the work that these podcasters are doing adds value to the network, but also some of the events that we do. It just creates this feedback loop that really drives progress.
Yeah. So with the last few minutes that we have before we wrap up this portion, my next steps, I'm going to grab James. His last name is pronounced
Holter.
Holter, thank you. I didn't want to say it wrong. James is a producer and so much more at this event. And so he and I are going to actually walk around while we live stream and have conversations just as we kind of show you the whole place. But before we do that, since we ripped through your podcasts and your events, I'd like to show you what I'm working on and get your feedback, because
Let's do it.
I honor your thoughts about stuff. So pretty simple. My company is attention.live, and here comes our site, Hello Future. So, I heard a friend of mine he goes, woke up and I said, hello future, nice to meet you. And I'm like, God, hello future, that's so like childish. Like, I want to approach the future with that childish
Well, it's a good play on hello world.
Right? It is.
From a coding standpoint.
That's right. That's right. So I'll just kind of walk through. It's very, very simple to explain. The problem that we're trying to solve is that content creators,
you, everybody in your network, Pete, most of the folks that are here, myself, we have two big problems that we can't solve right now easily. One is data ownership. We put stuff on Facebook and other sites. We're not necessarily own that content, and we certainly don't own the data, right? The secondary element is distribution across every single network. Like right now, we have to use multiple softwares in order to live stream to all of our collective YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages. So that's the simple problem we're trying to solve. Our vision, I wanted to get your input on this probably more than anything. Twitter is used for text. YouTube is used for video. There is no audio network right now that people are like, if I want to create audio content, this is where I create it, and this is where I consume it. I believe somebody will do that. I hope that it is Attention Live that does it, and I believe that about half the world could be using that platform as long as the voice is the interface, right? A lot of people don't read and write around the world. People don't even have internet access today, but soon they will. Bezos, Musk, Zuckerberg, somebody's going to put the satellites in the air. They're going to connect the whole world. Somebody's going to send hardware out, $8 rings, $15 watches, $25 laptops to the whole world, connect them. When that happens, people will now have a chance to create content, consume content at scale, and so that's the decade vision. What do you think? Be critical. I have a strong chin.
So you're talking about a social media network for audio?
In a sense, yes. It would be a social network for audio. Yes, in a sense that may be what it ends up being.
So bring it on. We need it, number one. So there's half your battle fought, right?
Yep, that's right.
When you talk about Twitter, when you talk about Facebook, let's start with Facebook. I deleted my account a long time ago. I had to create a new one because we bought Digital Book World,
right,
which had a group of 7,000 people.
Right.
Otherwise, I never would have gone back.
Right.
And every day, I long for the day I can delete my account. I don't like the company. It has bad DNA. It was born wrong. It was born bad. And it soon will be gone. I'm a believer in that.
Right.
They've made some acquisitions where the company will continue to exist with Oculus and WhatsApp, but Facebook is going to have to change or it'll be gone. Twitter has a lot of redeeming value.
Right.
I've met a lot of great people through Twitter.
Right.
But there's also a lot of garbage.
Sure.
So if you're creating an audio network, your challenge then becomes, how do you leverage AI and machine learning to where you're not feeding me the things that you would quickly learn I think are garbage?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're giving me the good stuff. That I think is the challenge.
Yeah,
in fact, it might be your whole challenge. The other thing is that as somebody who's been around podcasting and produced hundreds and hundreds of hours.
That's right.
Somebody, and it might be Audio Burst, which has a booth over there.
Yeah, they're amazing. I got to interview Rachel at the Voice of the Car
They're
Summit.
working their way toward this, but there's got to be better and more tools to bring the audio assets out of podcasting and audiobook creation.
Right.
Into the voice realm. It can be things like, I have an existing audiobook and hit a couple of buttons, put in some stuff. Now I have an Alexa skill that will play the first chapter of the book for free, and then it'll say, would you like to unlock the rest of the book?
Right.
Boom, done. You just made the author and publisher a bunch of money. That's one of them.
Yep.
There needs to be another one that takes, and I really don't know why this doesn't exist. There should be a tool where I can take 10 podcast episodes.
Yep.
Any 10, ingest them all into a system, and it intelligently creates a greatest hits sort of episode.
Right.
That I could then upload as another podcast or maybe as an audiobook itself.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, why does that not exist? Come on. So those are just two obvious examples of several other things. So to whatever extent that you can tie in Attention Live, is that dot live? Attention Live?
Attention Live, yeah.
Into that, I would use those day in and day out.
Right.
And then the other thing I would say too is that flash briefings, as far as they've come, still have some evolution to go.
They do.
And if you can take your social network of audio and one of the possible pieces of output is a daily flash briefing where I'm hearing thoughts spoken orally from 7 or 8 people that I care to hear, I would listen to that every day.
Yeah.
I would start every day with that. So those are some thoughts, and shoot, do it, and I'll be your customer number 1.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, we're going to guinea pig it, you know, in our network. I mean, to be clear of what the product does, it's attention is the network. The live stream of audio goes through attention first. A millisecond later, it live streams to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. By live streaming through our network first, I can establish the ownership of the intellectual property of the content creator, then live stream to the other major networks, because that's where the audience is at today. And then the archive would be sent to Spotify, Cortana, Alexa Assistant. I'm talking with one
You know what you're doing you know what it reminds me of?
Tell me.
Are you a fan of The Office?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's funny, yes.
Have you seen the show?
Yeah, of course.
It's mid-Office, I forget what season, where Ryan the temp comes up with this thing called woof.
Okay.
You need to Google this.
I have to watch the woof episode if I haven't seen it.
He's always coming up with like harebrained schemes to take advantage of people, but he comes up with this legitimate business idea called woof. And the whole episode, actually, now that I sit here and mention it, is Michael invests in woof. And some of the other people in the office do, and they end up getting out of it. I won't spoil the episode.
I'm gonna have to watch
But here's the premise of woof. You have some sort of message that you want to communicate, and it's like, and it automatically sends it out to text, phone, fax machine, on the computer, and so they send a woof and like the whole room explodes, like with Michael sitting in the office. You're doing woof.
Yes, I'm doing. Well, this is a manual woof. I mean, I'm sending it out to all of our collective networks, right? But this is almost impossible. I mean, in fact, I don't know anybody that, except for major name brand broadcast companies, that are doing anything similar to what we're doing. I don't know anybody that's doing what we're doing mobile. Like Eli's about to rally up Bitframe Media. He's the CEO of Bitframe Media. I'm very fortunate to have him and other lead media people that are part of my team. And we're going to literally walk around the whole place while we live stream to all your networks, all of Pete's networks, all of my networks, video. The issue is that it takes several world-class media people to patch it together and pull it off. It's really, really difficult to do. This will basically automate the whole thing, and the interface is either Alexa, Assistant, Cortana, Bixby, Siri. Of course, it can be your thumbs if we let that be an interface, but if we do, it probably won't last very long, because I don't want people to be looking down at their phone to do an audio broadcast. I just want them to call up attention. I want them to go live, have a kill word. They say the title and description, live. They go live. They do their broadcast. It's done. The archive gets sent out, like Anchor, right?
Yeah.
And then we prove data ownership by giving them, I mean, a house, you get a deed. A car, you get a pink slip. We came up with the term an AIT, an attention and influence token, because obviously that's
there
what
you go,
right? And that way they can lease, license, or sell.
Sign me
content.
up. Sign me up. You got a customer.
Got Bradley. And let me thank you, because the truth is, it was all these events that I did that allowed me to figure out what I wanted to build. You know, if I did not come to the Alexa conference in January, and if you didn't empower me to interview 50 people there, if we didn't do Voice of the Car conference, you know, if I wasn't able to come to Voice of Hospitality or be here, I wouldn't have had the chance to actually figure out what is it that the market wants.
So are you telling me you're coming to Project Voice to show off the product?
Absolutely.
That's good.
Will I be ready to show off the product by January? This is a very complex product. It took a while to build the prototype.
I'll let you go right now.
I'm trying to get the MVP done so I can use it every single day. That's the mission right now.
You got time.
I'm going to get you the MVP. You'll be one of the very few pre-alpha users.
There you go. I appreciate your time now, and I know that Pete appreciates this too. The ability to have a window into what's going on here. And thank you for having me now.
Yep. Thank you. Next moment you see me, I'll be walking around with James around the conference so that you have a chance to see what's actually going on in the whole of this event, the Voice Summit here in Newark, New Jersey, at the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be with you. We'll be back in just a moment.